Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. We have a new NBA champion, and for the first time in 50 years, it is the Milwaukee Bucks hoisting the Larry O'Brien Trophy, with Giannis Antetokounmpo putting in an all-time performance, putting up a 50-piece in what has been a 50-year drought. So perfect symmetry for Giannis and the Bucks. In what was another really good game, Sap, 3 good games in a row to end this series, 4 straight Milwaukee wins after Phoenix goes up 0-2. And I think really the only story today is Giannis's performance last night.
It was phenomenal, Jet. It really was. It's legendary to go out and score 50 points, 16 of 25 from the floor, including 1 of 3 from 3. When he hit that 3, I felt like it was going to be Milwaukee's night. But more importantly, 17 of 19 from the free throw line, and then throw in 5 blocks. I mean, he was sensational throughout this series, and he put the exclamation point on this series last night because they really needed him to do that, because Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton were combined 10 for 32. Now, Holiday gave you some rebounds, assists, and outstanding defense against Chris Paul and Devin Booker at different times. But in terms of scoring points, they needed Giannis to go out and get essentially 50 points because they only scored 105 totally, put up nearly half of their points. Just a great performance by Giannis, and very, very happy for him. As I've told you before, in my mid-teens to early 20s, Milwaukee was my favorite team. Marcus Johnson, Sidney Moncrief, they never made it to the finals. They were always like the second or third best team in the Eastern Conference, and they couldn't quite break through. So it's 40 years too late, but the Bucks are champions. And the only thing I'm worried about, Jet, is the first NBA championship I remember was 1971 when the Bucks beat the Washington Bullets. They swept them in 4 straight games. Here we are 50 years later. The Bucks are champions again. I just hope this isn't my last championship. I want to live through several more. So I don't want to be, hyperbolic here and wish death on myself. But hopefully we'll get to next year and we'll see LeBron get his 5th title, because I think that could be the offing.
No, I don't want to see that one. But yeah, I mean, it was really just an all-time great finals performance, all-time great playoff performance, whatever you want to call it, by Giannis last night. Your guy Marcus Johnson was in the house, though. I saw him in the locker room after the game celebrating, so I'm sure he feels good about that. Does he work for the Bucks, Sap?
He was doing TV for them for many, many years. He's got his number retired. He was one of the, 5 or 6 or 7 best players in basketball, late 70s, early 80s. He was my favorite player. He's done a lot of work for them. I don't think he's doing any work anymore, but I know at the beginning of the series, or at least in game 3, when the series shifted to Milwaukee, they had a really pretty cool picture of him and Kareem and, a lot of the old-time great Bucks, who were always a really good franchise from their inception. With Kareem, obviously, when you get him in your second year of his existence, you immediately become a contender. Then they had to trade him to the Lakers, got some pieces back. You never get enough back for a player like Kareem.
Right.
And then they were relevant till, mid to late 80s. And then they had some down times and then bounced back a little bit with, Ray Allen when they got to the Eastern Conference Finals and lost to, I believe it was Philadelphia. So they've had a nice run, great fan base, and to see, 17,000 people in the arena last night and then 65,000 people outside. I mean, it's a city that's starved for championships. The Brewers have never won. The old Milwaukee Braves won in the late 50s when Henry Aaron and Eddie Matthews were there. And the Packers, of course, have the most championships of any team in the NFL. But that's Green Bay, a couple hours away. But if you live in Milwaukee, I'm assuming you're a Packers fan. It kind of goes hand in hand. But no, it was just an incredible performance by Giannis. But we also have to call out the Phoenix Suns and their head coach, Monty Williams, who I love, absolutely love him. And again, showed what a class act he is. After the game, went into the Bucks locker room to congratulate them and say that it was a great series and that they were the better team and they made him a better coach. I'm going to disagree with that part because I don't think they made him a better coach in that series. They made him a worse coach in that series. Why on God's green earth would you just continue to cover Giannis with just one guy and with DeAndre Ayton, who just didn't look engaged defensively? I mean, that was a mismatch. Ayton had 12.6 rebounds last night. Giannis had 50 points, 14 rebounds. Other than that, the Suns outplayed the Bucks, but because Giannis was so much better than DeAndre Ayton, that's why the Bucks are champions today. And they never really doubled Giannis. They kind of gave him a path to the basket. Were they just saying, let him score 50 and shut everybody else down? That kind of is what happened, but the Bucks still won. I don't get why they didn't change up defenses against the Bucks to try to get them out of their comfort zone. And again, I love Monty Williams as a coach. I think I like him even more as a person, but I think he had a bad series. I think he was outcoached by Mike Budenholzer through 2 games in this series. I never thought I'd say that, but here we are 4 games later, and that was the case.
Yeah, I mean the Bucks made a really good adjustment after really the first game to limit
Mm-hmm.
Chris Paul and to he was just so dominant in the first game. And last night you saw like flashes of that too. You know, when he gets
Mm-hmm.
to his spot right around the free throw line, he doesn't miss from there.
Ooh.
Period. I mean he's automatic. And in the game one, he was just waltzing into that spot and doing whatever he wanted. He
Mm-hmm.
was doing it a little bit early last night, not so much late. But yeah, I mean, Giannis was just, I mean, he was phenomenal in every sense of the word last night. And if we're talking about Phoenix and the adjustments they didn't make, I actually thought that they they should have gone to, and this sounds weird to say because I don't think he's very good, but Kaminsky at least gave them some height, and I thought he did some nice things for them last night. Now, obviously, they didn't win the game, but maybe they should have gone to him the game before or 2 games before, just throw another big body at Giannis,
Right.
because Ayton was just getting abused, and they kept using him in single coverage, and nobody in the league can cover Giannis single coverage. Uh,
No, with the possible exception maybe of Ben Simmons and Anthony Davis, and even they would have a lot of problems with Giannis. He's 6'11". He's arguably the best athlete in the league right
he's
now. That
stronger than both
LeBron
those
is
guys.
36, right? And he's ferocious. I mean, that's the part that I love so much about him. Have we ever seen him take a play off? I mean, he's got a little bit of Kevin Garnett in him, kind of more of the happy warrior than Garnett. But Garnett was a guy that I always admired his effort level. Like no matter what, he was always giving you maximum effort. The same thing with Giannis. He's just up and down the court. He's beating guards down the court. He's blocking shots from behind. He's contesting jump shots. He went out and blocked a Devin Booker shot. I mean, he gives you max effort all the time. So yeah, he's impossible to guard. The thing about Ayton, which was kind of disheartening, he played smaller than a 7-footer. Like he never really extended his arms and hands to get in the way of Giannis. He was always kind of just bumping him. And in that sense, Giannis is stronger than him. He's going to bounce off of him and get to the basket. And he really never contested any shots. He played smaller than a 7-footer. Look, Pat Connaughton came off the bench and had 2 more rebounds for the Bucks than Ayton had last night. Again, 12.6 rebounds, not enough. I thought Chris Paul was fine last night. The entire series, Chris Paul averaged 22 and 9. I know he had a couple of off games. I don't think he was terrible. He was probably average in this series. They needed more from DeAndre Ayton. And last night it was a tough night for Devin Booker because what did Milwaukee do? They realized that Booker was absolutely destroying them in games 4 and 5. So they put Drew Holiday on him, who I think we can all agree right now is probably the best defensive guard in the NBA. I mean, he can shut people down. He's strong, aggressive, smart, all of that. And Milwaukee made the right adjustments, and Phoenix seems slow to make adjustments.
Yeah, and we saw, the sort of the fatal flaw, the 2 fatal flaws of the Suns roster. Not very deep and
Right.
not big. And so a
No.
lot was asked of DeAndre Ayton, who was playing in his first ever postseason, let alone his first finals. And really he was the only big. And so you saw in this game, the rebound differential was massive, 37 to 53. The
Mm-hmm.
Bucks just killed them on the boards. You like to say, as Pat Riley said, no rebounds, no rings, and the Bucks certainly did their job on the boards last night. I think that I don't know if too much was asked of Ayton, or that the Bucks didn't do a good enough job trying to get him involved offensively, because he really had no impact in this series
No.
offensively. Defensively, it's again a really tough task to be able to have to guard Giannis, especially once he gets into the paint. So much was asked of Ayton in this series, and he certainly didn't live up to it. That being said, he obviously still has a very high ceiling and a lot of potential to go. But yeah, I think the Suns roster, they just didn't have any quality big to back him up, and they just weren't particularly deep as a team. Which that's not every team has to be go 12 deep. That's almost impossible to have. But they didn't have enough depth. Milwaukee had a little bit more. You saw the lift that Bobby Portis gave them last night and in the
Mm-hmm.
series, not just on just the statistics, but sort of an emotional lift as well. And so credit to Milwaukee. They built a very functional team that had good depth, that had very good starters. They were good at defense. Their biggest flaw is free throw shooting, and they shot free throws really well last night. I mean, Ben Simmons would never go 17 of 19 in a game from the free throw line.
No, because
I
I
don't
don't
even
think
know,
Ben Simmons
I
would
don't even
even
know if
attempt
Shaq would.
19. No, 17 for 19. That's like Kevin Durant, Larry Bird level, right? That's incredible. And you could just tell his confidence continue to grow. Look, if he gets that good at free throw shooting, which I don't think he's going to be 17 of 19 every game, but he is a 71% free throw shooter. He's not Shaq or Bill Russell or Will Chamberlain, who shot in the 50s. He's 71%, which is a little below LeBron James career-wise. And LeBron's not a great free throw shooter. That's about his only fatal flaw. And it seems to be perhaps Giannis's only fatal flaw. Durant's an 85% free throw shooter. Kobe and Michael were 85% free throw shooters. Bird was close to 90. I mean, even Magic, who had an ugly looking shot, was 83, 84%. You got to get to that level. But I think that this is the third year in a row, Jet, that the bigger, more physical team won the title. You go back a couple of years ago when Toronto beat Golden State. Now, Golden State had a lot of injuries in that final series. I get it. But Toronto at least got to the finals by being big and physical, by beating Milwaukee in the Eastern Conference Finals and putting up that wall to keep Giannis away from getting to the basket. And, you had Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka, two big physical guys. You had Kawhi Leonard, one of the best defensive players in all of basketball. Siakam is long. Kyle Lowry's a pit bull at point guard. So they were a physical defensive team. Last year, the Lakers, big physical team, right? LeBron and Anthony Davis, great defenders. You had JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard giving you rim protection. And this year, Milwaukee was a much bigger team than Phoenix, more physical. And I think they just wore them out. By the time you got to game 6, it just seemed that Phoenix was gassed and Milwaukee was just, exerting their will on the Suns, and they were just good enough to get by them. And I think, would it be a different series if Dario Saric doesn't get hurt? No, they probably still lose, but it might have been a little bit closer because they did lack size. When you see Frank Kaminsky out there, who actually played pretty well last night, I thought he played better than DeAndre Ayton. He seemed more engaged. That's not a good thing when you're counting on him to be your 8th guy.
Right. And, one of the wins that Phoenix got, they had a huge game from Miles Bridges. You just can't expect
Yep.
that on a regular basis. For the rest of the series, he was pretty much a non-factor in there. Chris Paul, to his credit, did bounce back from some terrible games and was turning the ball over less, but he still, 3 turnovers, it doesn't seem like a lot. For him, that's a lot. So he had that.
Mm-hmm.
Booker had 6 turnovers last night. So the Bucks were really able to, pester Phoenix and either block their shots, turn the ball over. There, like you said, big and physical. They have active hands, and really, I think if you ask Milwaukee what keyed their win, they'd say their defense. And Giannis, obviously. But Sap, we've both watched basketball for a long time. You longer, so I'll defer to you. Where does this stand out in your mind in terms of single game all-time finals performances? Is it one of the best you've ever seen?
Sure, absolutely. When you put 50 on the board in a closeout game, and again, if they lose that game now, game 7 is in Phoenix, and at that point, Phoenix becomes the favorite again in the series. So it was pretty important that Milwaukee wrapped this thing up. I don't think they wanted to go back to Phoenix for game 7. They could still win there because they won in game 5. You got to look at, obviously, Magic Johnson in his rookie year when he put up 42, 15, and 7 playing center because Kareem Abdul-Jabbar got hurt in game 5. The Lakers go to the Spectrum in Philadelphia and win the championship in game 6. Magic was just incredible. They had something to fall back on at that moment because if they had lost game 6, they would have gone back to LA for game 7. And there's a chance that Kareem might've been back in the lineup. But that was so impressive by Magic Johnson. Larry Bird and LeBron James had so many great finals performances, but nothing quite like this, although LeBron did go 51, 8, and 8 in game 1 of the 2018 finals, but it was a loss in overtime. And look, LeBron has had more triple doubles in the finals than any player in league history. But I think you have to put Magic's rookie performance against the 76ers, and you got to look at also Michael Jordan in his last game as a Chicago Bull, putting up 45 points against the Utah Jazz, including the game winner, including the steal before that, including a layup before that. In that game, Jet, we had about 35, 40 seconds left. The Bulls were down 3. Jordan takes the ball, goes down the court, lays it in, cuts it to 1. Now on the defensive end, he just takes it away from Karl Malone, the biggest, strongest guy in the league, goes down, hits the game winner. That's probably the greatest 40 seconds that any players ever contributed in a closeout game. And Jordan had 45 that night. He only had 1 rebound, 1 assist, but it was a night where the Bulls only scored 87 points. He literally scored more than half their points. That's another game that stands out. And then Giannis last night, because if he doesn't perform like that, Phoenix is going to win that game, because Middleton and Drew Holiday, again, 10 of 32 from the floor.
Yeah,
they needed pretty much needed all of Giannis's 50 points to win that game. Look, if he goes 10 for 19 from the free throw line, which is something that he's likely to do, that game goes to overtime. Or, you get my point. It's a close game. So they needed all of that. And it's not just the offensive end, Jet. The defensive end. I mean, he looked like Bill freaking Russell out there. Like, Google Bill Russell highlights of his career. And Giannis, it's like scary how much he kind of channels Russell defensively with blocks, but also how he controls the blocks. He doesn't swat the thing into the 15th row. He controls it. And next thing you know, he's out on the break. I mean, what he does on both ends of the court, just amazing.
And he even had a couple goaltendings that were borderline too, that could have been.
And that's intimidating. That's intimidating. I mean, you're not old enough to remember, but I'm sure you've heard, or maybe you watched it on YouTube, the national championship game in 1982 between Georgetown and North Carolina. That the talent on the floor that night was sick. I mean, Jordan and Patrick Ewing were both freshmen. James Worthy was a junior. Sam Perkins was a sophomore, and Sleepy Floyd, I believe, was a senior. I mean, he had 5 future NBA superstar, Hall of Famer type players out there. And I think Ewing had 5 goaltending calls against him in the first 6 or 7 minutes. But his coach, John Thompson, was like, keep doing it, because it's going to intimidate the hell out of Worthy or Jordan or whoever, that they're not going to want to get in there. And I think Giannis kind of has that same mentality that Ewing had back in 82 or Bill Russell back in the 50s and 60s. That's how aggressive he is on the defensive end of the floor. It's his greatest game, and he picked the right time to do it. Game 6 of the NBA Finals, a closeout game at home, winning a title for that franchise for the first time in 50 years. It was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that is crazy that he did play the best game of his career in the most important game of his career. And that's really where, you elevate yourself and your legacy, is if you can do something like that. I mean, I put out a poll immediately after the game, and you made fun of me because I like to have the quick reactions about, has he passed some of these other great forwards, Barkley, Malone, Garnett, Nowitzki, just because it was such an unbelievable performance. You don't see this, in closeout games, for a guy to be so dominant, because like everything was going for himself. They were at home. They went ahead early, and then they kind of blew the lead. The if they had not won, they would have gone to Phoenix.
Right.
His co-stars weren't performing well. He had to take the team on his back and win a championship for him. I mean, when you we've talked about weighing, MVP trophies in a regular season, what some of the years it weighs more. In terms of like a finals MVP trophy, I mean, this is a big honking finals MVP trophy. I mean, he earned this one. He played his ass off in the finals.
Yeah, massive. I mean, both ends of the court. He's also an outstanding facilitator. He gets you 6 assists per game, because he doesn't necessarily force it. He understands now that, he can trust his teammates. He's a great teammate. He's a leader in a sense that just the pure joy that he plays with is refreshing, isn't it? I know Adam Silver talked about this last year, the commissioner, that it's kind of troubling that so many of the stars in the league seem unhappy, whether it's Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving or whoever else.
Everybody on the Nets.
Frown their face. Pretty much everybody on the Nets. Yeah. And some people on the Clippers as well. But to see this young guy play with that joy, it is refreshing. And it's where he came from. I mean, he came from Greece. 9 years ago, he and his family were selling trinkets on the streets in Athens. So he doesn't come through the AAA prism that most of the great players in the NBA come from. I also think that the foreign players tend to be more loyal to their franchises. I mean, we saw this with Dirk. We saw this. Tim Duncan was from the Bahamas, but, let's put him into this conversation as well. And I think you see that with Giannis, that they're so loyal to the teams that drafted them that they want to stay there. And Giannis signed that big extension last offseason. He could have waited a year and, decided, well, Milwaukee's not for me, I'm going to go elsewhere, or could have signed that contract after this year. But he also wanted to take the money because there's always that injury concern. And we saw 3 weeks ago that it looked like he blew out his knee and somehow got back to the NBA Finals, a week later. So give him credit for all of that. I just push back a little bit that immediately after this, and look, I'm so happy for Giannis, for the city of Milwaukee, that organization. But the first two things that happened was there was incredible blowback against LeBron James and Kevin Durant because they're different than Giannis. Well, there are different ways to build a winning team, and this was one way that it happened. They were fortunate that they played the Nets in the second round. Harden got hurt in the first minute of that series and then came back for games 5, 6, and 7 and was nowhere near the player he normally is. And then Kyrie gets hurt in game 4. They were fortunate to get by Brooklyn. They were also fortunate that they were playing the Suns in the finals, not the Clippers or the Lakers, if those two teams had been healthy. If LeBron and AD had been healthy, I think the Lakers are in the finals. If not, if Kawhi's healthy, I think the Clippers are in the finals. I think both of those teams would have a better chance of beating Milwaukee than Phoenix did. But you know what? Take advantage of that opportunity. Who cares? I mean, the 2007 Red Sox beat who? Colorado in the World Series. Do you think they're not, going to accept that World Series banner? Who cares? You win it. It's a championship. And the way Giannis performed last night was it was awesome. It really was.
Yeah, I mean, same thing could be said for the Lakers last year. They
Sure.
won the bubble. They beat Miami, who probably shouldn't have been there anyways.
Right.
But it was a weird year, but it's not. You don't take it away. It's a title. But yeah, I mean, obviously, Sap, not being a huge LeBron guy, I loved it last night, and I hate the super team thing. So except for when I was on the Celtics. So I loved him saying, he said, this is the hard way to do it, and this is the way to do it, and we did it. Blank.
Was that targeted? Was that targeted Durant more than LeBron
Harden,
though? Because
Harden.
Oh, or Harden as well. Okay, so you think
he
it was
hates
Harden?
James Harden.
He hates James Harden because James Harden, he had this tiff during the All-Star break a couple of years ago when I believe Giannis picked Kemba Walker over James Harden when he said he wanted someone who would pass, and Harden was like, "What's he talking about?" Yeah, but Harden's like, "I've led the league in assists. I have more assists than Kemba Walker." So Giannis may not be a great general manager, but he doesn't like Harden. And Harden also said it would be nice to be 7 feet and athletic and just run down the court and dunk the ball. Well, that's kind of the object of the game, Jet. I mean, the league has been dominated by big athletic guys, right? Wilt and Russell
he was
Shaq
insinuating that Giannis isn't skilled. Giannis is skilled. I mean, come on. He doesn't just run down and dunk. That's not all he does.
No. I mean, it's just effort is a skill, right? So you think it was intended at Harden? I think it may have been intended at Durant because Durant did go to a super team. I mean, he went to a team that won 73 games the year before. Now, here's the difference, though, Jet. And again, this gets a little bit into nuance, but Durant going to the Nets, I mean, he went there before Harden went there, okay? And he brought Kyrie with him. Durant created a super team, right? He didn't join a super team. There's a difference there. LeBron's never really joined a super team. He's created the super team by the fact of him going there. I mean, when he went back to Cleveland, was that a super team? Yeah, they Kyrie Irving. But, the 3 years before LeBron got there with Kyrie Irving, they had the worst record in basketball. When he went to the Lakers, they didn't have much. It's very different. I mean, Durant's the all-time biggest
villain
of this, right? The biggest, that's a perfect word. I mean, you'll use villain. I don't, because I'm all for player mobility. I really am. I mean, look, if you're in an organization that sucks, you move on. I mean, LeBron was in Cleveland for 7 years. They could never get him.
Yeah, but a team that won 73 games, Seth,
that's a little bit different. But here's the thing. Your boyfriend, Sam Presti, who you love, who drafted Durant, then Westbrook, then Harden. I mean, I don't know if we've ever seen 3 consecutive drafts that good in the history of any sport. I don't even.
Yeah, that's
maybe I'll do
Grand
research
Slam
on it.
3 times
pretty
in a row.
Good. He couldn't keep it together. And then by the time we got to 2016, it appeared that management was siding on the side of Russell Westbrook over Kevin Durant. And I think Durant realized, I can't win with this guy, Westbrook. So he moved on. It was a weak move. I get it. But I never held it against him. It did make it unfair for, the first 2 years together. And it would have been unfair the third year if they didn't get injured. They would have beaten Toronto in the finals. So that's an all-time move. Whereas
perfectly even matchups in the finals, according to Durant.
Right, as Durant would say. Right, and I'm waiting. I don't know if Durant has responded to what Giannis said last night. Durant did congratulate the city of Milwaukee, but never directly congratulated Giannis on Twitter. LeBron did congratulate Giannis on Twitter, which I thought was pretty cool because LeBron is the passive-aggressive guy. He just likes to be involved with. He likes to be happy, and I think he's got a different mindset than Durant, who seems miserable. But no, this was impressive, Jet. Absolutely. But again, give Milwaukee credit because in the offseason, they were able to re-sign Giannis, and then go get Drew Holiday, which they gave up a lot for him. They probably gave up too much for him.
Well,
But
now it
they saw
justifies
him
it,
as the
right?
guy. Right. They saw him as the guy. Yeah.
Title justifies it, period. I mean, that doesn't matter.
Absolutely. However they got it, they got it.
Could have given up 8 first-round picks, and the title justifies it. I mean, so
Yeah,
their investments in, obviously, I mean, Giannis was a no-brainer, but the Middleton extension at the time was questionable, and I'd still say he's a little overpaid. And how much they gave up for Holiday. So it's not like these were no-brainer moves other than extending Giannis. So, it took some balls to make these moves, and it paid off. Did they catch a couple breaks? Yeah, but you tell me the championship team that hasn't caught breaks, and I don't know how far you have to go back. I don't know that there's ever been a championship team that hasn't caught some breaks, even if it's not external, if it's internal. Not getting injured is a break. That it's a long season.
Yeah.
People get hurt, so the fact
I'd say the Bulls
healthy,
championship teams. Yeah, the Bulls championship teams. They never got to a 7th game in the finals, but they did get to a 7th game multiple times in the Eastern Conference Finals. I always go back to the 2001 Lakers. That looked like a mismatch every time they were on the court.
Yeah, they were on roughshod through the league.
They lost one game in the postseason. I'll go back to like the '86 Celtics. I mean, they just were better than everybody, and they proved it. The Lakers, '87, they beat the Celtics in the finals in 6 games. You needed a couple of lucky breaks, and then the Magic Junior hook shot to win Game 4. If that series gets to 2-2, who knows what happens? But yeah, you generally need some breaks to go your way. And the other team I'll throw in there's the '83 76ers. They lost 1 game. I memean, Moses Malone said faux, and he was pretty close. So those are teams that were clearly better. Milwaukee's not that. I mean, Milwaukee was 2 inches away from losing in round 2 to Brooklyn. If Kevin Durant wears a size 14 instead of a size 17, the Nets
win. Bayless was saying that about 30 times last night. He could not shut up about that. My God. Does he love Kevin Durant, or is it just because it's a LeBron thing? And he wants
I think it is. It is because he picks the other guy. It's like if Coke is better than Pepsi. So if you don't like Coke, then you pump up Pepsi. That's what he does with Kevin Durant. And look, LeBron has been the best player in the league for, I'd say, a dozen years. It hurts me to say this here in late July 2021. I think the crown is being ceded from LeBron to Giannis. And everyone thought it would be Durant would be the next guy up. But what Giannis did in this postseason and what he does on both ends of the court, I think he's ready to assume the mantle of the greatest player in the NBA. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to hold it forever. I mean, if LeBron comes back next year and the Lakers get to the finals and win, then maybe he gets it back. But right now, I think we can all make a case that Giannis is the best player in the league. And a lot of it is because on the defensive end. He's that good down there.
Yeah, he is that good. He obviously won Defensive Player of the Year last year. He's phenomenal. I think that he won Finals MVP. He had an all-time, not just Finals performance in the game, but just his averages over the Finals were phenomenal. He was great in every game. So I think, right now he says, I'm the best player in basketball. It's hard to argue that. Could LeBron take it back next year? Of course. Could Durant? Mm-hmm. Sure. But right now, July 21st, day after the NBA Finals, it's Giannis. And that's pretty awesome for him and for Milwaukee to, have the best player in basketball and for him to have decided to stay there. It is fantastic. And listen, Sap, again, I love what he said post-game because that's what he feels. And they were saying,
I'm right with you. Absolutely. I think I push back a little bit because I like when people push back against this, but in their own life, if you're in a suck situation, you get up and leave your place of employment to go to a better place. Yeah, so but why doesn't this work in the NBA? I'm tired of hearing, well, you need some breaks and you just should stay where you are. I mean, all these old guys, these old players that bring this stuff up, they're full of shit because, first of all, there wasn't full-blown free agency in the NBA until 1998. So Bird and Magic, they didn't have to go anywhere. They played for great organizations, incredibly competent organization. Charles Barkley, who I love Charles Barkley, but when he starts bloviating about this stuff, I get kind of incensed because he played his way out of Philadelphia to go to Phoenix, and Phoenix was pretty loaded when he went there. They had Kevin Johnson, Tom Chambers, Dan Marley. They were a loaded team. They got to the finals his first year there. They lost to Michael Jordan and the Bulls. And then he signed with who? The Houston Rockets with Olajuwon and Scottie Pippen. So obviously Barkley was ring chasing. Karl Malone and Gary Payton were ring chasing when they went to the Lakers. Kareem left Milwaukee to go to LA. Damn, Wilt Chamberlain left Philadelphia to go to LA because he needed a bigger stage. He went to LA to play with Elgin Baylor and Jerry West. So this has been going on forever. I mean, this is what
Giannis
turns me off.
can legitimately say it. He
Right.
he didn't go chase. He stuck to his guns, and it worked out obviously like gangbusters for him. But he has a legitimate claim to say this is the right way to do it. Barkley a little less so than Giannis. Duncan can say it too.
Yeah, Duncan's the real deal, and Dirk. I mean, but I think the foreign players, and again, we can get into the semantics, but I mean, Tim Duncan didn't necessarily go through the AAU system, right? He was a swimmer before he was a basketball player in the Bahamas. Right. So I think they just have a different mindset. Now, the one foreign player I think may have a different mindset is Luka. He's more Americanized in terms of that attitude than, say, Giannis.
He's also been a professional since he was like 14.
He's been a professional longer than Giannis, I think. I mean, even though he's 3 years younger. So yeah, he's got a different. He's more Americanized in terms of that mentality than, say, Dirk or Giannis or Tim Duncan. So I mean, I could see in a couple of years, maybe he signs that max deal with Dallas, and then midway through it says they just can't do anything here. Send me to wherever. I could see him being that guy.
Fortunately for Dallas, they are a big market, and they have an owner, who's willing to spend. So, it's not like he's in Oklahoma City, and so the thing is, and the only thing I'll push back on with what you're saying, Sap, is that I agree. LeBron, when he left Cleveland the first time, that was a suck situation. No doubt about it. It was terrible. They could not find anybody to play around him. As far as Durant, that wasn't a suck situation in Oklahoma City. They almost got to the finals the year prior, and they had been to the finals. So he did not leave a crap situation. And LeBron, when he left Miami, it wasn't the best situation, but it wasn't a bad situation. Nor was it when he left Cleveland a bad situation. Were they fantastic? No, but but it's a better situation.
It's a good situation because he's there. Right. I mean, that's the point I'm trying to make. I mean, same thing. Look,
he stuck in Miami with Wade and Bosh, I know they were at the end of, not their prime, but they were still a viable contending team, Sap. It's not like if he had stayed, they would have had no chance of winning it.
Wherever he went, they were going to be a viable contending team. As I said, Cleveland had the worst record in basketball the 3 years before he went back there. Now, of course, they had Kyrie Irving, who had already been an All-Star Game MVP, and you knew the talent was there. And then they had the first pick in the draft, which they flipped for Kevin Love. So, yeah, they had, a good squad at that point. Because, again, we all know in basketball, 3 guys can carry a team. Look at Milwaukee. They basically have a superstar, 2 stars, and then a bunch of role players, and it all worked for a championship. So, yeah, I mean, Durant's is completely different than just about anything. I mean, could you compare it to Alex Rodriguez after the 2003 season, pretty much having to be traded by Texas because they couldn't afford him anymore, and he goes to the Yankees, right, who were a great franchise.
Oklahoma City,
but baseball's a little different too. I mean, as great as Alex Rodriguez is, he went to the Yankees and they won 1 World Series while he was there. Yeah, Oklahoma City could have played. He should have been the guy in Oklahoma City. It seemed like they were trending towards Russell Westbrook. I mean, the last few years they played together, Jet, Westbrook took more shots per game than Durant. To me, that's insane. That really is totally insane.
That is crazy.
That's just that's like having, a good number 3 guy on a radio show hosting while a supreme host is all of a sudden doing, headline news. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And I'm not knocking Russell Westbrook, great player, but Durant should take more shots than Russell Westbrook. That's fact, not opinion.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, it's not like it was a bad situation there. And
no.
Some of these guys, I think you can accuse a lot of these guys who have joined super teams of leaving situations that weren't that bad. Like Harden leaving the Rockets, he wasn't leaving that bad of a situation there. He created a bad situation, and then he left.
Yep.
It was all by his own creation.
He couldn't play with anybody, right? Like he couldn't play with Clint Capella. Then he couldn't play with Chris Paul. Then he couldn't play with Russell Westbrook. He wanted Russell Westbrook. They were best friends growing up, or they were close friends, whatever. After 1 year, he couldn't deal with that anymore. So it seemed that was more of a James Harden problem than somewhere else. And again, I just think that the guys, they grew up through AAU. They're pampered. They play 1 or 2 years in college, and they're on their way to the NBA, and they're building a brand right away. With Giannis, it's completely different. When he got drafted, it was barely anyone knew who he was. They saw some YouTube highlights of him from Greece. He was at the time 6'9". he was 6'9", 190 pounds. Now he's 6'11", 245. You know, he's worked on his body. He's worked his ass off to become what I think right now is the best player in basketball. The title does help him with that title, but you know, when you look at it, the last 3 years, Jet, the guy has 2 league MVPs. He played like an MVP this year. I think he was top 5. I think he finished 3rd or 4th in MVP voting, and a Defensive Player of the Year, and now a Finals MVP, where it wasn't even a discussion other than Stephen A. Smith, who thought that, you know, Middleton could win the Finals MVP going into Game 6, which I thought was lunacy because, I mean, Middleton had a couple of off games in the Finals. Giannis's worst game was 20 points and 17 rebounds in the first game, coming off of nearly blowing out his knee.
Right.
I mean, that was his worst game. The guy had 3 games of 40 or more points, and he got his customary 13, 14 rebounds. And again, the defensive end is where I think he makes his mark. And that's why I've always put, you know, LeBron and Jordan as the 2 greatest players ever, because on the other end of the court, they're great. Well, Giannis is that as well. I know you talked about those 4 forwards that, you know, is he going to surpass them? I think he can surpass them. I wouldn't say quite yet, but certainly a better defender than Dirk or Barkley, better defender than Karl Malone, pretty similar defender to Kevin Garnett. In fact, more versatile because he can really extend more. I mean, that's really what separates him. He, you know, in 3 years from now, that may not even be a discussion. He may have surpassed all those guys. He's right there with them right now. I just don't want to put him above him quite yet. He's only played 8 years in the league, and his first 3 years were like a feeling out process. So he's been a stud for 5 years. But look, what the guy accomplished this year is just incredible.
Yeah, now that he has the title under his belt, to pass those guys, you know, it's just all a matter of just compiling statistics and continuing to play well. I mean, he doesn't necessarily. It would be, you know, I think it would rocket him past them if he wins another title or another MVP. But if he's just consistent for the rest of his career, then he's going to pass them because this was a monumental accomplishment. They hadn't won a title in freaking 50 years, and he was unbelievable in every game in this finals, and in the biggest game of his life, he played the best game of his life. I mean, that's an unbelievable accomplishment for him. So good for him, good for Milwaukee. Sap, let's talk a little bit about the Suns. Where do they go from here? Chris Paul's a free agent. I know there's a lot of talk about him joining a super team. This is what I'm going to say about that. He's the president of the Players Association.
Mm-hmm.
He can't take a minimum contract to go join the Lakers or something like that. He can't do it. It sends a horrible message. He's just not in a position to take less money. Phoenix will offer him whatever the hell he wants. I would venture to guess he comes back to Phoenix.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a player option for $44 million. So if he accepts that offer, or, you know, signs on the dotted line, that's what he'll make next year. Play one more year, which would be his 17th year. I don't think the Suns are going back to the finals next year. I think they're more likely to lose in the second round of the playoffs than return to the finals. I think they're a flawed team. They got on a great run here in the postseason, and they did benefit from injuries to the Lakers, to Denver, and to the Clippers. I mean, every team they beat in the Western Conference was without a star player or even a superstar player. So they benefited from that, but good for them, like Milwaukee benefited. That's what you do. And being healthy is part of the equation. I mean, you know, give Milwaukee, their big 3 are pretty sturdy, healthy, dependable guys. And so is Chris Paul and Ayton and Devin Booker. So that's part of the equation. I'd love to see him go to the Lakers. I think that he would fit in great with LeBron. The only thing I could see there is you would have the 2 smartest players in the league on the court together. They're great friends. That may not necessarily work, right? I mean, they may butt heads at some point because they're both alphas. They're both incredibly bright, incredibly accomplished. But in looking at it from a schematic standpoint, yeah, I mean, Chris Paul, LeBron, and Anthony Davis, that would, I think, work seamlessly. But you're right, Jet. The only way he could go to the Lakers is to take a really low-level contract, and the president of the Players Union can't do that. It's just a terrible message.
Yeah, I think, you know, even LeBron, who's not president of the Players Union, but is active in the league, you know, he could have taken less money, but it sends a bad message. Get as much money as you can. You don't have to take discounts. It's not the NFL where, you know, you have to fill a huge roster and stuff like that. Just, you know, earn your maximum dollar. And as the president of the Players Association, that's, you know, his primary responsibility. So the Lakers have about $9 million in cap space. That's nowhere near enough to get him.
No,
like they have enough to give someone a $9 million per year contract. That's like the maximum slot I think that they can do right now, Sap. So where do you think he ends up? Back in Phoenix?
I think he stays in Phoenix. I think he likes it. He has a great relationship with the two young guys, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton. It's close to his home in Los Angeles. I mean, that could also be a pull for the Lakers, is that Chris Paul lives in Los Angeles, like many NBA stars. So I think that's probably the best place for him, unless he looks at another team that's close to winning a title that maybe has more cap space. But who is that team? I mean, Chris Paul in Philadelphia would be interesting, wouldn't it? But do they
They
have
have not. No.
no money either, because they've got Ben Simmons to deal with? So I think his best option is stay in Phoenix or take a discount contract with the Lakers. And again, I don't think he's going to do that. I mean, is he going to resign as the president of the Players Association just to go ahead and try to win a title with the Lakers? I mean, he's been president for 8-9 years. It's not exactly been a short run. So maybe that's an option. Look, there's four guys in the history of the league, Jet, that have made over $300 million just from contracts. It's LeBron, Kobe, Kevin Garnett, and Chris Paul. So money's not an issue with Chris Paul. I know he's probably looking for 3 years, $100 million, which would put him over the $400 million mark. I doubt Phoenix will give him that. Robert Sarver, the owner of Phoenix, is notoriously cheap. I doubt he's going to give a 36-year-old point guard a 3-year, $100 million deal. But maybe the easiest thing to do is for Chris Paul to opt in, $44 million, and then you go from there.
Yeah, the teams with the most cap space, the Knicks have a ton of cap space, but they're not close to competing for a title. The Spurs, same thing. The Thunder, same thing.
Yeah,
The Mavericks and the Heat could open up a lot of cap space, and I
that's
guess
interesting.
You could look at either of those teams and say, a little bit of upgrade with talent, and Luka is better than Booker, obviously.
Yep.
Maybe if I'm enough to get them over the top there. Miami, the culture is so good, but I think that you saw some serious holes in how good the roster actually is this season. So, I mean, he could go to one of those teams too. I wouldn't be surprised, but I think he likes Phoenix. I think he gels well with the team, and I think he has a great relationship with the coach. So, and they'll have, they can have the financial ability to bring him back. So if I had to guess, I assume he was just going to resign there.
Yeah, I would think so. And this stuff's going to happen quickly, right? Because the draft's the 29th of
July. Yeah, really quick.
A little more than a week. And then shortly thereafter, we're going to start seeing moves. I mean, Kawhi, what's he going to do? Is he going to exercise his 1-year option or a longer option? Is he going to go to free agency? Who the hell knows with Kawhi? I mean, he's not exactly the most communicative guy in the league. In fact, he's the least communicative guy in the league. And then he's dealing with a knee. Chris Paul, I'm sure he enjoyed getting to the finals, but it's one thing to get to the finals, another thing to win there. I thought he played pretty well in the finals. He averaged 22 and 9. He had a couple of off games, but he's a 36-year-old point guard who's 5'11". Like,
right.
When did we ever see a 36-year-old point guard, 5'11", lead a team to a championship? I mean, the closest thing would be Isaiah Thomas with the Pistons, but Isaiah was 28, 29 when he won those titles. Isaiah wasn't even in the league anymore at 36, and he also had a better supporting cast than Chris Paul had. I mean, he had, Dumars and Aguirre and Lane Beer, and of course Dennis Rodman and Vinnie Johnson. I mean, they built a really outstanding organization and roster around Isaiah Thomas. He didn't play with a top 50 player, but he played with a lot of really great players. So, I mean, I think it's a lot to ask, and now his legacy gets battered somewhat. I think his legacy improves this year. He was third or fourth or whatever, and fifth in MVP voting, and he got to the finals for the first time with a very young team that hadn't been to the postseason in a decade. That's an accomplishment, because I always push back when people say, so-and-so is 4-6 in the finals, because that's what LeBron is. Going to the finals and losing is better than not going at all. I just always push back against. Same thing with Brady. I mean, Rob Parker thinks that Montana's better because he's 4-0 in the Super Bowl. Well, Brady's 7-3. 7-3 is better than 4-0 by leaps and bounds. It's just.
So what's he think? Eli Manning's the second best quarterback in the history of football because he's
2-0. Right, and Troy Aikman's 3-0, and Bradshaw's 4-0. So those guys are all better than Brady. I mean, I just always equate it to the Olympics, if we're going to have an Olympics this year, with gold, silver, and bronze. A gold medal is the best. The silver medal is the second best. I'd rather have 5 golds and 5 silvers than just 5 golds, right? I mean, I'd rather have that. So I always push back against that. I mean, is Bill Russell tarnished because he's 11-1 in the finals? Like 12 times.
Yep. No, it's I agree with you, wholeheartedly in that. I've always thought that was a silly argument, but and Giannis is now 1-0 in the finals. So,
Right.
maybe that's good enough to put him ahead of LeBron. He's got a better winning percentage in the
That's
finals.
right. Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's gonna do it for us, Sap. We are going to. I'm going to LA for a week, but
Nice.
I think we'll be able to cover some basketball there. We'll do some draft analysis before the draft and
Yeah.
after the draft. So we got plenty of stuff. Just because the season ended doesn't mean the podcast is ending. We've got plenty to talk about this off season. React to all of it. So make sure you still check out the podcast. We will be here. We will not sleep. We will make sure you get up to
Nope.
date with all the latest news and reaction. Again, we are the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We are presented by Full Press Coverage. Check out our Twitters all off season long. We'll tell you when the show is coming up. At John Sap 25 at Jet Stryer. YouTube is youtube.com/Jet Stryer. And yeah, we will be back and we will be around all off season long. So again, just because the finals is over doesn't mean the podcast is over. We will be here constantly. You cannot get rid of us. All right, Sap. Bucks are champions. We'll do we'll maybe do a more of a post-mortem on the season a little bit later, but 50-year drought, Giannis drops 50, pretty good symmetry.
Yep.
All right, we'll see you, everybody.